Now in the studio, we have our esteemed panel, my co-host and colleague, Karabo Letlhatlha, CNBC Africa political reporter. We've got Matsi Modise, Vice Chairperson of Simodisa, looking after small businesses, and political analyst, Aubrey Matshiqi. Starting off with you, Karabo, you've been in the newsroom all day following this story. What do you expect to hear tonight from the State of the Nation address?
Chris Bishop, I can say, without any doubt, I'm expecting exactly what business expects. We have heard the talks, and now we want to know that the president can really follow it up with action. What we are definitely in for today is hearing more about how we're going to save Eskom. But we haven't heard a detailed plan that outlines what happens post the bailouts. The bailout is not a plan, and the president needs to communicate that today.
Matsi Modise, what do you expect to hear or hope to hear today from the State of the Nation?
Say action. It tends to feel like deja vu when you're on these panels because it's always the same rhetoric, same conversations. And I think South Africa has gone through a lot in the past 10 years. We've been finding our bottom. Hopefully we found our bottom. And now it's time to rise as a nation. I certainly have a lot of faith in the current leadership that we have. I think globally we can see what could go wrong with countries that have bad leaders. I can mention a couple of countries right now. All that's in the news. But I think Cyril coming, our president coming in, he has inspired a lot of hope and also just restored the dignity of this country. So today I'd also like to get a sense of how we're going to create this cohesion. How are we going to provide the tools that are necessary? How are we going to fuel levers of growth for our country? So it's all about action.
Aubrey, I guess come to you. We talked about this last week, what we might expect. You said that maybe you could write the speech before you came, but what do you expect from this?
Well, let me start with what I hope will not happen. I hope he's not going to chew water, because on too many occasions, the president tends to chew water. He's going to say a lot about the economy. In the last State of the Nation address, I think he gave us the longest wish list we've seen since 1994. We'll have another wish list about the economy, about turning around the performance of the state-owned enterprises. But if we are expecting a detailed plan, it's not going to be in this speech. And some will say it should not be, because a State of the Nation address is a broadly stated vision for the next year. And when the ministers over the next few weeks talk, we will get an idea of what the detailed plan is going to be. But the second reason why you're not going to get a detailed plan is because there isn't one. Even the National Development Plan is still not a plan, but we talk about it as if it is a plan. And the reason that is because the ruling party is going through one of its deepest crises when it comes to thought leadership.
Well, speaking about thought leadership, thought conflict, I mean, Karabo Letlhatlha, I mean, you've been following this story about factions within the ruling party who could mess this whole thing up. Just to unpack it as you understand it.
For me, I think this might actually, if it's not curtailed, it might get to characterize the years of the Cyril Ramaphosa presidency. I worry that the president has been, on a party level, catching up to an agenda that was set by somebody else, i.e. Ace Magashule. He had to water down that statement, if you will. But I find that we are not even at a point where we're having real conversations, Chris. For me, what's important is not only what Mr. Matshiqi has said about the dearth of leadership quality within the African National Congress, but I find that the first 18 months of the president, when he was interim following Jacob Zuma, was almost a setting of the scene, and we have talked issues out. And for me, what's going to be important going forward now is, can he get the cohesion within the party that will allow him to thrive in the state? Because I find that without the other, he will not be as successful as a state president.
Matsi, what do you think?
Well, I think what's happening now is a huge distraction. It takes away from what he should be focusing on. And I think he needs to steer himself into what should I do to really drive this country, drive the economy. He's not going to make everybody happy. But just the politics around growing our country is just too much of a distraction for our president. We need to start focusing.
This faction fighting thing, is it think it's overstated? I mean, I was hearing this morning, someone was talking, saying that there's a second faction, Ace Magashule, everything that Ramaphosa does, he's going to try to undermine it and block it. Is it that bad?
Well, I think the Ramaphosa of the past, 2.5 years, tends to blind us to political reality. If you go back to the conference in December 2017 in Nazareth, the ANC comes out with a policy platform consisting of, first of all, the idea of radical economic transformation, which was not Ramaphosa's platform. The amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution to give effect to the idea of expropriation of land without compensation, that too was not supported by the Ramaphosa camp. They come out of the same conference calling for the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. That too is not Ramaphosa's policy platform. In other words, you give the crown to Ramaphosa, but he must represent and speak to an agenda that is an agenda of his opponents inside the party. And therefore, there is a certain level of paralysis you must expect from Ramaphosa, because it's going to be very difficult, as we saw with regard to the Reserve Bank debate, that he struggles to represent an agenda that is not of his own, an agenda of his opponents, and therefore, his greatest challenge is going to be internal opposition in the ANC. And if he loses the party, because people seem to be excited by the fact that he seems to be in control of the state, whether that is true or not is another question altogether. What is important is that if he loses the party, the battle for control of the party, it's going to be a matter of time before he loses the state.
Okay, I was just seeing the live pictures there. Looks like President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think, is arriving at Parliament. Deputy President. Ramaphosa, not quite.
A man who had to delay his own swearing in earlier, but as the President said, now his team is complete following his swearing in as an MP.
Okay, well, hopefully Cyril Ramaphosa will be there to make his speech very, very soon. Now the deputy's there, but let's throw something else into the mix now. Let's have a quick look at one of the richest people in Africa. Christo Visa has to say about the State of the Nation address.
Over the last 20 years, I have tried to make my contribution in terms of helping the country. I chaired many important institutions. I chaired the IDC for 9 years, which was a very time-consuming but extremely important job for me. I did it gladly. I was asked by government to chair Mango, the airline, in its initial years. And wherever I can help, particularly this current president,
has he
for
called
whom
you
I have a very high regard. No, we've seen each other, but I have a very high regard for him. I'm fortunate that I'd known him for, few decades. I think he can be what South Africa at the moment needs.
What should he do so that other business people like yourselves, whose confidence is currently sitting at 2009 lows, what should he do to convince them of your optimism?
Well, there's a whole list, but I think he knows exactly what he needs to do.
Top one.
Well, he's already started doing, the one thing, maybe not such a huge step, but making the executive smaller, getting rid of some of what is referred to as the dead wood. He's already started making the right moves, but he's in a long game.
There you are. There's a vote of confidence there from one of Africa's biggest billionaires. Want to go around the table? What did you think, Karabo?
The man said he's only known Cyril Ramaphosa for a couple of decades. So, and I guess maybe this speaks to Mr. Matshiqi's point, the fact that not only is Cyril Ramaphosa, he's very business friendly, he's known by a lot of players within the business space, but within his ruling African National Congress, he faces policy positions that he must implement, and these are policy positions that sometimes go against what he's trying to achieve. You are not going to drive foreign direct investment by fidgeting with the sub. And right now might not necessarily be the best time to be taking over an institution like the South African Reserve Bank. And I say that because we are in a bad economic spot. So outwardly, to anyone who's not in South Africa, it really looks like we've reached the end of our tether in terms of ideas, and we are here because we have no other way no other plan of getting to this. What I'm expecting the president can counter that with, because that is really what he should be trying to do. He must try and focus on growth industries and industries that can create jobs. But can we get a consensus on what those industries are? And instead of, for instance, the stimulus package, which was introduced late last year, which the president spoke about, which we still do not know how it performed. And if you speak to business people, they will tell you, who travel to this country, they will tell you that the visa regime is still pretty difficult, even though we heard what we heard during the stimulus plan, and the visa regime was part of it. So I wonder how much of, for instance, the Jobs Summit, and all the other dialogues that we've had prior to the beginning of the 6th administration, as it were, will he be accountable for today, and can he give us progress at all?
There's a question I have for you, Matsi. I mean, I've asked a lot of economists in the last 6 months or so, talking about Cyril Ramaphosa, what he's doing, and people say, yeah, you know, he has these conferences, it's good PR, says the right things. For entrepreneurs that you work with, are they feeling anything from this at all?
So as Karabo was speaking, I was hissing under my breath because there are a lot of conventions where we have a lot of conversations around growing, and too little is done around correcting the things that we have in place and working with what we have. And I think one of the questions that Fifi asked is, to Christo, is how do we create more people like you? How do we create industrialists, people that are going to grow, companies that are going to employ more people, that are going to shape the growth of our country? Well, Christo didn't really answer that question. He had a great platform to do that because we would all love to know. But I think, you know, South Africa is well suited to really engage entrepreneurs. We have a lot to offer in terms of support. There's a great ecosystem of support, but it tends to be a top-bottom approach. We don't engage our constituents. We don't engage entrepreneurs and understand what is it that you need. We hire international consultancies to come inside and give us ideas around how do we grow more entrepreneurs that are going to grow industries and grow you know, jobs in our country. And so if you had to take a little bit of time and start being more grassroots, start working closer with the private sector, with civil society organizations. I think Cyril's era of leadership has to be a very inclusive one, because with your answering your question around how do we feel? We feel that a lot has been done, a lot has been said, a lot of money has been spent, but we are not seeing the impact. We are not growing businesses that are going to employ ourselves and employ other people in this country. And as a country that has a lot of support, we need to start analyzing what's working, what's not working. We need to start engaging people at the grassroots level, and we also need to start being a little bit more inclusive.
I mean, my question to you, Aubrey, I mean, I like, you know, I like what I'm hearing. I'm sooner one of the biggest billionaires in this country says, yes, we've got hope, we can go forward. But on the other hand, does it really make a difference to the actual economy itself, all this chat and talk?
Well, I mean, there is a book that has just come out, written by an American of Indian origin called Winners Take All. And it contests the idea that the elites will solve the problem of the world, because history shows that they don't. It was quite amazing for me that we had this debate about the Reserve Bank and Esma Khashoggi talking about quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing, I believe it's called.
Now, what's interesting about that, if you take that as an example, the period of quantitative easing in the US delivered the most to the elites and very little to the rest, you know. And so, yes, given the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa is an anti-corruption crusader, I suppose it was apt to go to the voice of moral and ethical leadership like Christo Wiese.
Well, speaking about
but the reality is that you are not going to find solutions to the problems of inequality, poverty, and unemployment if we leave those to the elites.
Well, speaking about elites and what have you, I see the big man just arrived with his good lady wife there at Cape Town, President Cyril Ramaphosa, his third State of the Nation address. One thing was interesting I was reading earlier. They were saying that President Jacob Zuma's average State of the Nation address was 5,000 words. and Thabo Mbeki is for 7,000 words. I wonder how many thousand words Cyril's going to rack up tonight. Going to be less or more than Thabo Mbeki? I don't know. What do you think, Aubrey?
Well, I think the difference would be the speed at which the SONA is read.
Yeah.
And the font size. Well, that's one thing. What I absolutely appreciate about the current administration, especially as we see the Speaker of Parliament there, Ms. Thandi Modise, is the emphasis on cutting the budget. This might be one of the cheapest SONAs we've had in 5 years. They have gradually been getting lesser and less and reacting to the economic times, as it were. It's very hard for poor people to be watching the elites again treat themselves to more benefits, which are really, I don't know if you can always say are necessary, as it were. But it's nice to know that government can react. But I don't know, part of a bigger question must be the flexibility of policy in South Africa. For instance, I mean, the president established the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, which sits in the communication department. What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture? Why is that commission not reporting to the president? And quite frankly, as a youngish person in South Africa, you know, when you hear very old people who are challenged by the technology they hold in their hands speak to you about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, you know we're in trouble. You know we're in trouble. We need more young people, not just as a face. And I mean that, like, for instance, the ANC has deployed its former ANC Youth League Secretary General, Mr. Nzenzo. He is now at the Department of Home Affairs as a deputy minister. Surely we can have more young people within government, and surely we need more young people who are techno-savvy, who can take us through these challenges. But if we're going to inspire hope, we can't have half measures.
But then again, talking about young people, I was thinking about when we talked earlier about the appointment of the Justice Minister. A lot of people said to me, "Oh, young lawyer, you know, nice to see people." But you said maybe he's not ready. I mean, it's too early.
I think it's too early.
It's too early for him. But
personally, in that, I think they should have started him at deputy ministerial level. And talking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, what fills me with despair is that invariably people talk about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, do not know that it's the title of a book. and it shows, and it shows in the quality of debate we have about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the alacrity with which the talking heads who talk about the Fourth Industrial Revolution embrace what I call techno-rationality.